Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's California State Library webinar hosted by InfoPeople. This webinar is part of the California Library Literacy Services series, and today's topic is Family Literacy Programming Goes to School, how our programs can help adult learners make a difference in the school lives of their children, from teacher conferences to homework help. And I am now happy to turn the webinar over to Amy Prevedal.
Thank you very much. We're happy to be here. And I wanted to tell you that the webinars we're providing are in response to emails, to common knowledge publication for the State Library, and from a recent survey on the CLS listserv. So this is the second on family literacy and schooling, the schooling arena. And we'll hope that you'll join us for the following two webinars that you see in front of you, and you'll hear more about that online as they show up. We've gathered the information from you, and we hope you'll recognize your own input here today and hope that we can address what matters to you the most. Please, some housekeeping notes. Ask questions. We have a chat box where we can see questions that you type in, and we'd really love to respond to what you're thinking. There are a really fine collection. There is a really fine collection of resources on the slides at the end of the webinar. Some very nice research into family literacy, and also as it pertains to supporting adult learners in helping their kids in school. And this InfoPeople webinar will be archived starting tomorrow, so you can go to the archives and just relive every slide and pick apart the information and click on links. So that's open to you as well. After this webinar on InfoPeople today, we're going to try something new, and we want to invite you to be part of it all. We're going to open up a Zoom conference call, and it has some more advanced interactive capabilities that will allow us to hear you and hopefully see you, because we actually want to give you some experience with a technique that you can use to begin a process of learning with adults in your program that leads to inquiry and research, lots of information sharing, and ultimately is a mode to develop voice and confidence for an adult learner, especially as they go to school to advocate for their children. Okie doke. Next, we have some very cute pictures. That's not really okay to say. Some very lovely pictures of our facilitators today. And I want to say I'm just so honored to have Abigail Sims Evelyn and Sherry Drobner with me today. It is such it's such an amazing experience because together Abigail and Sherry just have decades and decades upon decades of experience with adult literacy education and with family literacy education as part of that. Abigail started up the Berkeley Reads program that is just such a lovely program, and I just think it has everything to do with setting it up right with that tone of just love and acceptance and just great work. And she has started actual schools herself with her family and has been on the schooling side of the family literacy school relationship, and is now the manager at the Richmond program, and we're also lucky to have her in the field and active. And then we have Sherry Drobner, who sent us a very remarkable likeness to herself here. And she is very recently retired from being the manager of the Richmond program. And she started, I think, in 1988, leading the Alameda County Adult Literacy Program, and did that for many, many, many years and set up programming that was so innovative and so responsive to adult learners and so effective. I just use the word so a lot with the way Sherry can can really effectively and beautifully do excellent work. So I do want to add that putting together the Berkeley piece and the Sherry Drobner piece, that for her doctoral research in language, literacy, and culture at UC Berkeley, she was able to join the Berkeley program when I was coordinating that in 2003 to run a homework club and to also do really impressive research about helping learners develop a voice to use specifically with issues that come up around their children's schooling. So between Sherry and Abigail, I just don't think we could have a better pool of experience to draw on today. Some questions that came up from the field were many, and there was a survey on the online listserv, and it mostly, so many questions had to do with schooling, and within schooling, homework is a very big topic that adult learners bring into our programs. People want to be able to communicate confidently with teachers and with the school community, and want to be able to advocate effectively for their kids in school. So how do we help parents get more involved in the dialogue going on at schools? And that's our topic today. So let's see what we have for you. We're going to offer you a starting point for developing a family literacy program that will support learners to make a difference in their children's education. And our overarching goal, not only during this webinar, but for programs all over the state of California, is to tap into learners' knowledge and from there strengthen their voices in contexts they don't feel as comfortable or powerful in interacting with, because people might be incredible leaders in home, in the community, at their churches. And so we want to extend confidence and voice into the school setting. And we're going to learn about 3 basic assertions that can help us create quality programs for family literacy. And so important and key along the way is acknowledging adult learners' knowledge and challenging and checking and identifying assumptions that we as literacy providers and all of us as human beings carry with us. We'll highlight some research to help you frame your thinking and to enrich what you can offer learners. And we also will present some nuts and bolts of a program structure for you to consider and modify to get you looking for what will work in your setting. And frankly, I'm basing a lot on what really worked well in Berkeley many, many years ago. And so I realized that a lot of times space is what dictates programming. So please be thinking not of what I outline here, but of how things might fit differently in your place, okay? So we are so welcoming your ideas and opinions and answering your questions every step of the way, and we hope that you'll join us for the Zoom call. Here we have 3 assertions. So here's Sherry to talk a little bit about these.
Hi, good morning, and thank you so much for inviting me to join you. It looks like we have 38 people listening, and it's really odd talking out to these ghostly folks. But I'm going to start. When Amy asked me about this and about family literacy, I've always had a lot of questions about family literacy and sometimes felt uncomfortable about the whole idea. I want to just reiterate something I heard recently on the radio. I was listening to a podcast, and a woman, I think she was the editor of Gourmet magazine, and they were referring to something, and some of you may have heard this, they were referring to the cupcake scandal, and she explained what the cupcake scandal was. And basically, Gourmet, many years ago, for their cover magazine, had a picture of a cupcake, and that's all that they had. She received a lot of letters, complaints. People were just thought it was scandalous that they would feature cupcake on a Gourmet magazine. And so her commentary about this was honestly saying to folks, look, you know, the food world doesn't belong just to you. The food world belongs to everybody. And somehow you can no longer just define what is fine food. And it made me think about what that means in terms of the work that we do and in terms of the work of family literacy, which is that, you know, it's been so many years what's been defined for families is a certain way of being. And if you're not that way, there's sort of an assumption of deficiency. So when we started thinking about what we wanted to talk about today, we came up with some of these ideas about these assertions, and to honor the adults and the families in our program. So the first assertion is that the adults coming to our program have knowledge. They are not empty vessels. We also want to say that family literacy is about building a learning community, and that is important for learners to learn from each other, to share resources, and that school literacies and home literacies are not the same thing, and that sometimes, and it's obvious that school literacies seem to take dominance. School literacies take dominance over home literacies, and oftentimes people don't recognize that home literacies are very powerful tools to start from. So these are the assertions that we hope that you'll be thinking about.
Okay, thank you. And we will take a look specifically at home and school literacies later on. So keep going, Sherry.
Okay, so in terms of the first assertion, it's really important to tap into the reservoir of knowledge that parents provide. And to do that, you really, when you start thinking about your program, the assessment in terms of what your participants do at home, what their interests are, what their questions are, and what they already know are very, very important. And you'll find that you'll learn a lot through your participants.
Thank you. And then Abigail, I believe you have a whole thing that you'd like to say about this, about knowing your audience.
Well, you know, Amy, that's an interesting way to look at it. I don't know if really it's a whole thing, but I do think that it's an interesting piece of the puzzle that we're putting together today. So let me first off start by saying I'm really glad to contribute to this discussion. And I think that with the years that I've put in, that maybe I have something that I can add to, you know, our dialogue and our deliberation as we move forward. We're trying to open doors and create avenues for people who are, you know, improving their reading and writing skills to assume their, you know, right positions and powerful positions in their own communities. I would like to say regarding the assertion number one, is that knowing our audience, I mean, as a FFL coordinator in a literacy program is probably one of the most important, the key ingredients for what you need to, for what you're trying to be able to provide for others. And if you were to ask, you know, what is the main deliverable that an FFL provider would want to deliver, it probably would just be skills. And we want parents to access basically skills that are required to function successfully in their communities. And so to be able to do this, basically we need to be able to identify what parents need or want. And if you want to know what parents need or want, you really need to go to the source, which would be the parents. So what we have to do, of course, is to ask and not go into a situation where you're assuming, but that instead what you're trying to do is to go into a situation where you're asking parents and their children about the content that you need in the creation of the service that you're trying to provide. So literacy providers have to be willing to tap into that reservoir of knowledge that parents provide. And of course, the most obvious way to do it is just to, you know, go to the source and find out what's happening. I'm sure that probably looks like for a lot of people a situation where you're creating surveys, you're organizing informational meetings where people can come out and explore with you, let them, know what's going on in their lives. And then that gives you like, the meat, what you need to start with in creating something that's meaningful. And the entire premise is based on the fact that you know that the student or the learner knows, and that if given an opportunity to express what he or she knows to you, you'll be informed, and then you'll be able to move forward.
Great. And then, Abigail, could you talk a little bit about the idea of nurturing exchange? And it kind of goes along with, we can't like carry our assumptions and just lay them on people, but instead, looking at family systems, we can see from the very, very, very beginning here that they're based on a nurturing exchange. Did you want to talk a little more about that, Abigail?
Yeah, I think it's such a critical thing to realize. Often when I have thoughts about that, I think about what my own mother meant to me as I was growing up. She was, one of the first literacy students that I ever worked with when I worked for LEAP, years and years ago. And she helped me to understand a lot just about how important nurturing is, and, what did that look like for her and for me. And I think as parents today, we actually think about, like, what is the nurturing? What does it look like to you? And how can you as an FFL coordinator, really include that in the nature of what it is you're doing? So nurturing to me has to do with the fact that there's this incredible exchange that exists between a parent and a child. And in that exchange, something so powerful there allows a development to occur for the child and even also for the parent. And I think of the development of our literacy services, the FFL service, really as a journey in which you need to ask parents for directions on how to get to a destination. They can tell you about the directions and about a destination because of the fact that they're engaged in this nurturing relationship with their own children. And that nurturing information is really at the heart of what you're creating in your FFL services. I was thinking about this idea of nurturing, and I came up, actually in my research, I was looking at a bunch of interesting things, the wealth of information that's available to us out in the, in the internet world. And one of the things I ran across was a cool set of lists. Of course, when you're in this kind of business, you're always looking for kind of, in a way, easy fixes. But really, there is not an easy fix for this. You do have to think about this, and you have to engage in dialogue, and you have to pull people into the process to figure things out. But I did run across a list, if you will, and it was a list of really interesting questions that I feel that you can answer because you're into the nurturing of your child. So as a parent, you can answer these questions, and I think these questions really kind of lend to the type of information you want to use. And so here they are. What is your child's? Let me start with this one. Tell me about your child's friends, for example. Let's just say if they're in school, right, or in preschool, wherever they are. What is your child's schedule like? What are the things that a child does like during the course of a day? What do you? How do you show affection in your family? Me, I'm the hug touch type. I just hug everybody. What 3 words describe your child or children? If you were to use 3 words to describe them, what would they be? Describe when you know your child is happy or sad. What have you done in the past to protect your child? How much time do you spend with your child or teenager? How do you let your child know that you love him or her? When do you spend time with your child or teen, and what do you do together? I think these kinds of questions lend to information that informs you about nurturing. So this is what I do to make my baby happy. This is what I do when I'm engaging with my child. And that kind of information is critical information. because it informs you. And what it does is, I think it gives, if a learner were asked that, if a participant in your program were asked that, well, what you've immediately done is put them in the position of authority, because
Mm-hmm.
they know that information. And I think that that's really critical to do. So I hope I addressed that for you, Amy.
Oh, that was very nice, Abigail. And then, just part of that first assertion that adults are not empty vessels and they walk in with all sorts of knowledge and experience. It's like, well, when you try to assess what parents have to offer that will be enriching, acknowledging their traditions and values are critical. So I know that you've done some thinking about this too, Abigail.
Yes, I have. And I think, I remember back in my school days, because I've taught almost every grade in the school district, in the West Country Caucasus Unified School District. I've worked in almost every grade. And we would have these interesting visits from like our principals, and they wanted to know what we were doing to create a multicultural and diverse community or environment in our classrooms. You really can't do that without checking in, tapping into that source, that reservoir again. You have to reach out to your families, to the parents, and you have to find out what's significant in their lives. What are their traditions and their values? And in my belief, I've not met a parent yet who didn't value education, and because it's a part of, because they see it as a vehicle for like the pathway for their children to have better things in life. So education in and of itself is highly valued, and all families have different ways in which they try to achieve that particular value, and they use their traditions, things that they enjoy, things that they love, as a way to access it. So.
Okay, great. And I want to make sure, like when we're talking about parents in our family literacy programs, we also know that those might be grandparents or aunts and uncles or caregivers. So just please, take that in as part of it, that we're talking about the adults who care for their kids. So the traditions and values are important, and how can our programs align with them? And so just to sum it up a little, that adult learners must inform and guide the family literacy services that we offer. We need to step back and think about the most effective and appropriate roles that we can play in supporting families in the realm of schooling. And I think we're going to show you later on in this webinar / the Zoom call that follows it, a way to decide, like, well, what does the curriculum look like for the learners in our program? That when we're talking about not assuming what people are needing to know or needing to be able to do, because that's how we do it, that also means that the preset curriculum is not a place to start. It's really in response. So Sherry will talk about that a little more. But let's go ahead and head on to the assertion number 2. Sherry, what is this about?
Assertion number 2. So building a learning community, and it's not just a phrase. I mean, it really involves intention and a belief that our participants and our staff members can learn from each other, because it's all about sharing knowledge, sharing existing practices, looking at things critically. So in family literacy, we're looking at families not just looking out for their own children, but beginning to look at the systems that are affecting a lot of their children similarly, and thinking about how they as a community, because they have more power in numbers, can affect change and make that community more powerful. And so obviously individuals will come wanting to address their own specific issues, but I think as you build a learning community and people share information, they're going to find that they have so much in common, and there's ways to move forward together.
Thank you. Yeah, so that is why dialogue and having opportunities to seek and identify, to seek solutions to common issues is so important, to have that space in your program for that to happen. Participating in a learning community, it's an ongoing process. And so now we're thinking about, this model of homework help. And while children are receiving homework help, parents are meeting to share information, to share knowledge, to discuss and to question and research and build confidence, and to be able to bolster their voices in the process of addressing the issues that are important to them as they interact with schools. So I want to talk a little bit here that participating in a learning group, it provides practice and it establishes patterns of questioning and thinking for adult learners. And that those patterns transfer to other communities beyond the library's walls. That they transfer to the neighborhood school where their kids go when adults go to interact in that social sphere. So in a learning group, adult learners can hear their own concerns echoed back, and they can realize that what might feel like an isolated issue or problem can actually be a commonly held issue or problem, that they're not alone, and that in fact, they're making really good sense in what they have to say. And that a learning community provides advocacy practice and experience and the support of like-minded people to be able to try out what you're going to say at the parent conference, or what you might bring to the principal meeting that you've been requested to have, or what happens in a learning group in your program can be, it can be the advocacy and the influencing work that they take to new social arenas. So the social institutions family interact with, in this case schools, are ripe for practice in our programs to take to those places and to be able to address issues outside of what practice happens at the library. Okay, here we go. Oh yes, exchanging knowledge is very important. Abigail, I have some questions, and anybody can jump in, and that means you, Sherry, or all of our fabulous listeners can type in their comments as well. I'm just curious, what are the characteristics of a learning community? And how do literacy practitioners go about creating this community that fosters a knowledge exchange? What does that look like?
That's two really good ones. Here's my first response to what are the characteristics of a learning community. I think it's like this. I was at a meeting not too long ago, and we were having a discussion about being at the table, and he made this statement. He said, "Well, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu." And I was wild. Okay, so if I'm not at the table, then I'm on the menu, meaning that my ideas may not get a chance to come to a real level of fruition. I mean, so that's a real serious situation to me. And then I thought, okay, well, I got to make sure that I'm at the table. And I think at a learning community, I think of learning communities as circles, or being at something like a table, where you get to go to that table and you get to talk about the things that are real, that impact your life, that you would like to have an impact on. And then the beauty of being in this circle at that table is that people are actually listening, and that they're thinking about their own situations, then they're thinking about what they're hearing, and everybody is engaged in, okay, well, let me see what I can do to contribute to that, or what can anybody else help me with this at this table. So the learning community is really that. It is a place where we're all coming together to share our ideas. And the assumption is that you have something to share. And that often, when we're in a situation where, we think that, well, I'm improving my skill, the question can come to your mind that maybe what you have to share is not valuable. But that's what we need to actually tear down. Actually, what everybody at the table has to share is valuable, and people need an opportunity to have their voice heard. And so I think that's really what we're trying to do with the FFL services, is to understand, help parents to realize their place at the table, and to feel empowered enough to express their ideas and what they value, and to know that their traditions, everything that they bring to that table, is significant.
There you go. Thank you. Did you want to
I
add
wanted
in?
to add to that. Yeah, I wanted to say something too, that also in theory and practice, sometimes the practice is different, because what happens is you might find adult learners, because they've been systematically invalidated over the years, there's like resistance to this idea as well. So there's resistance to understanding their own authority in the situation. They might look at you as a facilitator or as a leader as the person holding, no, you're the person with the knowledge. I'm just here to listen. Let me just gain it from you, because it's been such a tradition. So I think that's something also that in our program, we have to think about how we create a situation so that we can break that resistance.
And I don't think that's easy. It's kind of like saying, yes, bring that cupcake, because it is delicious food. And I love it that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So somehow there's some food involved in this discussion.
I could be. No.
Okay. So let's take a look at actually curriculum. When we're talking about a learning group that is informed by what's happening as adult learners articulate it, Sherry, what do you say about curriculum? Where is it? What is it?
Well, I guess what I want to say is that a prepackaged curriculum cannot really be the starting point. And I know we've already emphasized this a great deal, but we can't assume we know what learners want and need, and we can't know where a process of dialogue and inquiry will take us all. And it's a little scary, I know that, because you want to come with everything prepared. I mean, even in doing this webinar, like, oh, we need to know where we are going to be with all the minutes. and I think it's hard to let go of that, but you're going to find, you'll find that if you begin the process with this kind of inquiry and questioning, and not necessarily have a set curriculum of what you plan to teach, you will eventually know what you need to be covering, what you need to be discussing. And there are a lot of materials and activities that can respond to what those things are that are identified by the participants in your group. And you can problem solve around these questions. And there are some, and not to say that curriculums are a bad thing. I mean, there are great curriculums that have been designed through this sort of process in working with families. And I think one of the programs in their survey response mentioned Abierta Puertas, and I looked at that program and it looked very interesting for Spanish speakers, and I think that looked like a curriculum that was really, they designed it in a kind of open process with family members. So it's not that we're saying don't use a curriculum, but it needs to really speak to the needs of the families, and you can develop one over time.
Mm-hmm. And Sherry, so the open doors, the Abierta Puertas, it looks to me like kind of a bilingual type material, which it looks fantastic. And we know that in our programs, a requirement is, we're working with non-native English speakers, but we're not ESL programs. And I wanted to know, that okay, so the curriculum, after you've done this process, then you know what people need, and so you look and you bring it in. Could you give us an example of what that actually looks like to say that the idea is generated in this group? What does that look like? And is there a way of making that concrete to all of our participants?
Well, it might be jumping ahead a little bit, but one of the examples I've been thinking about is that you hear from participants a lot of times that they have difficulty with getting their children to do homework, or they want to help their children, but they're having difficulties with homework, and so on and so forth. And then as you begin to investigate and research the whole issue, you begin to see that, well, maybe it's not the child, maybe it's not the behavioral things, maybe it's not about you not setting up a homework space. Like, those aren't really the issues. Maybe the issue is like the homework itself. It's a problem. And so in a group situation, one of the things you could do is you could bring in some of the research or information about different kinds of homework, about what's been successful, talk about it, and then think about, parents can begin, then you're sort of shifting, and it might be that parents are starting to think, well, how do I talk to the teacher about the homework? So then that becomes, okay, well, let's talk about that. And then you start to think about activities. Maybe that becomes role playing, So, I mean, it moves along. And of course, there's going to be a lot of issues about that. Again, we're jumping ahead, but if you're an open enrollment program and people are just like coming through 1 week and not the next, those are going to be issues that you might have. So you have to think about that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But was that example good for you?
Oh, yeah, I like that example, because it's like, okay, what we've talked about in the group, then what activities will be helpful in response to it. So let's take a look. We'd mentioned before about how home literacies and school literacies are not the same. And I realize I've just segued to the next screen. So the programming is about bridging these literacies and not saying one's better than the other or supplanting one with the other. So let's take a picture of a bridge. And then, Sherry, can you tell us a little more about home literacies?
Sure. I mean, that's pretty simple, and it's probably what you think. Everyone out there thinking about, what do you do at home that involves reading and writing and all these things? That's a home literacy practice. They say that literacy is it's a social, cultural practice, and the things that you're doing in the world as you're participating. And in home, there's a lot of things. You might be reading recipes, you're on your computer, you're looking up information, you're playing games with your children, and they involve words and letters, or even coloring and talking, or like all these emerging literacy practices. So all of that is happening at home, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then we get to.
Sorry, I just wanted to comment on that a little bit, Amy.
Yes, Abigail.
Yes, and I was thinking about, Sherry mentioned a really important word, and that is emergent literacy. And emergent literacy has to do with that point in time when children, in a child's development, before they are actually able to read on their own or to write words that others can read. And so, I think that whole idea of that emergent literacy skills, and the people who are mostly engaged in emergent literacy at the home is the parent, because when you're engaging in those routine daily activities, what you're doing in that moment is basically helping your children to develop emergent literacy skills. And those skills are what they need to experience and have, so that when they enter into the school setting, they're able to function. And these very skills are at the foundation of reading. That's what you're doing, laying the foundation of reading. So I'm hoping that as we are engaged in this dialogue, what we're really understanding is, again, the power of that parent. The parent is the first teacher. The parent is the person who's engaged in developing emergent literacy skills with their children. And that if program coordinators realize that, I think, going into the situation, they get to have a greater idea of what it is, of course, the parent is bringing to the table. And I believe that it was Dr. Nicole Taylor. She's done a lot of really interesting work on family literacy. And she says that there are two assumptions with emergent literacy that's going on. One is that literacy learning really begins at birth and develops gradually over time, and that pre-literacy skills for children get developed at during this time, and that this is the critical foundation of like the reading that's going on. So I just wanted to just point that out because it's such a critical term, and it means a lot, and it also gives you a very clear indication of what parents are able to provide, but also to speak to parents about their role as the emergent literacy teacher. I mean, is really important because sometimes when you feel unempowered in a situation like a school, you need to be reminded about how great you are. I think
Yes.
programs are have an opportunity to do that.
Well, thank you for bringing that in, Abigail. That this is a perfect place for it too.
Okay.
Yeah. What about school literacies? Abigail,
Yeah,
Sherry, what do you think?
I have a ton of ideas about that, but go ahead, Sherry.
Well, no, Abigail, as a teacher, you could probably talk about what all those school literacies are. But I do see the picture that I particularly like, though, on top here is all the children lined up, and I'm not sure what they're lining up for. But I feel like that has a lot to do with it's not just school literacy, but what, thinking about what the function of school is sometimes. So I'm trying to create some kind of order and specific order for a purpose in the future. So these pictures, obviously, the pictures here are kind of interesting. But school literacy is a different. There's school literacy and also the language of school, right? There's a different kind of academic language and a different kind of role than necessarily what children are doing at home. And sometimes there's I want to say, an emotional context that develops between school and home, and sometimes that can create a conflict for the child. So Abigail, why don't you talk more about school literacy?
I'd like to talk about it a little bit. I give you an example of a conversation that I had just the other day with an adult learner, and she has children in school, and she was sitting in my office and she became very tearful, and I asked her, hey, what's going on, and then she said, well, because my phone, she had her cell phone, my phone is blinking, and I know that it's the school calling to complain about my son. And then I said, oh, how do you know? And then she said, well, because he's been having a lot of problems, and they've decided that every time he has an episode that they're going to call me and ask me to come down to the school to see what's going on. And then she said, and I'm just, every phone ring is terror to me, and I feel so horrible because I don't know what to do to make my child's experience be different. And so I thought this was such an intense, sharing, of course, and also that it actually tells a lot about how parents can feel really, unempowered when they walk into that place, because at that point, and that and often for some parents, there's a situation where whatever it is that you're engaged in the home, and whatever is happening with your home literacy practices, it's not making this kind of like transfer into the school literacy environment. And I believe that occurs when, in fact, that the teacher and the parent really have like a different language. And it actually is something deeper than academic language. There's this disconnect that's going on. And so I thought really long and hard when this person was talking to me about what to say and how to respond to her. And I think that one of the real things that I think we need to try to get at in our FFL programs is to kind of think about, what does a teacher want versus what a parent wants. And if in fact, there is a marriage somewhere in there, where is the bridge in these two sets of wants? And so, because, teachers are like motivated by, their requirement to make children be ready for standardized testing, and they are motivated by, like whatever type of parameters that their school and the vision of the principal outlines. They have to kind of deal with that. And so what I believe is that the more parents have an opportunity to come to that table and talk about the significance of who they are and what they contribute, and communicate that with their teachers in the schools, then the greater the opportunity there is for us to have like a common language. I remember in my classroom days when I was teaching in the classroom, I would often ask parents to describe to me what's going on at home so that I can try to mirror some of the things that you value here in my classroom. Because I want your child to believe and know that you and I really are on the same page, and that we're both trying to achieve the same thing, which is that the child will be able to successfully function, and be able to grasp the content and the subject matter that we're trying to learn. And so I could go on and on with that, but there are areas I think that we need to look at. One of them, what is the language that you use in parent conferencing? What is the language that you use when you have to deal with, like the client that I described, what she's dealing with, and what are possible solutions? We can go in detail about some of those things and really kind of explore, and you have the forum and the opportunity to do that in your FFL programs.
Okay, thank you, Abigail. And that's a lovely segue into this image of a bridge. I do want to say we have a question here. Please give an example of an emergent literacy skill, since they don't often look like literacy. And I think that, we'd mentioned some of these things like, being able to tell stories, to take a walk and talk to your child, singing to your child, getting used to building things or playing games at the kitchen table, looking through books together, even if it's not attached directly to language and learning. It's all about experiencing things and talking about it together. And let's go to the bridge, because here's kind of the meat of the situation, where we have home literacies and we have school literacies. And the question is, how do you actually build a bridge? So, Sherry, what can you tell us about this metaphor here?
Well, I think Abigail spoke to it, but I'll just add, that a bridge is usually goes in both directions. And I think that typically, though, the bridge is always, sometimes it's been seen that the families are walking one way and they need to cross the bridge, but the school system doesn't need to cross the bridge to the family side. And Abigail gave a perfect example as a teacher, what she would do to understand the context of the child's life and situation to better make that connection. And so when we talk about the bridge, that's why communication is important, and advocacy is important, because it begins to carry some power for a family member to be able to go to a school, to a teacher, and relay information and try to help the teacher understand what's going on at home, and for the teacher to respect some of that, and also think about how he or she can also, involve those situations as well. It really reminds me, going back to the cupcakes, that idea, this is what food is supposed to be, and food is not supposed to be the cupcake, right? But all of a sudden, people, the cupcake eaters are going, wait, we think cupcakes are valid too, and we want to be part of this conversation. And so all of a sudden, the person who's defined the cupcake, or defined what is or not food, has to say, okay, yeah, cupcake's part of this too. It's good. We need to honor that as well. So I think that it's not just it's a bridge, but it's also like an opening. You know, it's like an inclusion. And so I think thinking about our family literacy programs as a way of getting families included into the conversation, or as Abigail put it, sitting at the table.
Mm-hmm. Right, right.
And maybe we can have a picture of a table too, okay?
Yeah, that's a good one. And then a menu full of delicious cupcakes.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have, you know, I think a question this raises is, well, who are these institutions if they're not open to my personal input? Then whose are they? And so the idea of setting up a learning group in your family literacy program is a way to start developing this culture and this community that realizes together, yeah, we are that institution, so we need to have a voice in it. That gets us to some of the research that Sherry has brought to us, kind of continues from that doctoral research into 2019. So what do you want to say about this, Sherry?
Oh, okay. So, well, you know, I did my dissertation a long time ago in the world of academics. It's a long time, 2003. But I did, for the purpose of this, you know, webinar, I wanted to see, well, have things changed much? And they actually hadn't changed that much. But the point in doing some research, what I found is that really fundamentally where there's most significance are the expectations that both family members and teachers have for the children who we're talking about. And that's super important. And as Abigail said, and we know that our learners that come to us do have expectations for their children. They want them to learn, and they love their children. And what we can't control, though, oftentimes are teacher expectations, and that's very, very important. And so there is some research that finds that teachers will have higher expectations of the students if they are more familiar with the parents. Mm-hmm. And also some of the research states that, you know, parent involvement can help, but there's different criteria of what parent involvement means, and how the help is. It's significant in certain ways, but not always in the same way. So homework assistance, for example, is more helpful in the higher grades from a parent. And that kind of assistance also is more helpful if it's like specifically more tutorial. So so when you look at the research, and there is a list, you can read through it and some of the things. Oh, I just see you skipped. You went to the next slide. I'm sorry. You'll see that that the value of homework for younger children versus older children is really important to look at as you're thinking about homework assistance. That if homework really is, for the younger years, oftentimes homework is used as a mechanism to just build in some kind of order or sense of completion or focus for children, and the idea of practicing, you know, the infamous worksheet. So it's not necessarily, it may have the goal might be reached in different ways. So we talked about earlier the idea of play. And there have been a lot of successful programs where, you know, people use extended literacy activities like through art, through drama, through play, that also achieve learning and support skills. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the kind of homework that we looked at originally. We also want specific intentional learning and so if you sit by your child and read with your child, that's important, and possibly feeling for the child as they're reading. But there's also research that says, yeah, specific, you know, those families that spend time like asking questions and pointing out and in specific with books.
Your voice is going
So,
in and out, Sherry. I hate to say.
oh, is it really?
That's better.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna hold on to the mic. Teaching sometimes will actually lead to some of the studies show greater success in kind of what they call academic.
Oh dear.
Okay, we've kind of lost you a little bit.
Added.
I'm going to move the slide. So try this one, Sherry. You know, a problem with the webinar where you can't see people, it's like, oh, what's going on over there? So
Okay, we're on homework design, right?
there we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm sorry. So
Okay.
one of the pieces I found was this. It's called homework design, and I really liked it, so I wanted to share it with everybody. It's a very innovative approach, and it finds that the best homework tasks exhibit 5 characteristics. The assignment must have a clear academic purpose, such as practice checking for understanding or applying knowledge or skills. And they give an example. Well, then it says that the assignment should efficiently demonstrate student learning. And then it says the assignment should promote ownership by offering choices and being personally relevant. And fourth, the assignment instills a sense of competence that the student can successfully complete the assignment without help. And the assignment should be aesthetically pleasing. It should be enjoyable and interesting. But what I really liked, it's a very simple example that they gave. And I know that we've used it a lot in our teaching with adults. And I don't see why not apply it for children as well. But it's a question of oftentimes teachers assign a reading and then they assign, please answer the following questions. And they want to know if, someone understands the reading. And a homework design idea would be simply turning that around a little bit and the teacher basically stating, okay, here's the passage. I'd like you to come up with 2 questions that you might want to ask other people about the passage. So it's a really simple technique, but basically the ownership becomes that of the student involved. They're looking at the passage and deciding what's important to them, what questions they might have. So that's just one example, and we have a link to the Designing Interactive Homework piece also.
Great. And we have a few minutes left, and it's good to know what the research is saying about homework, not only so you as a literacy practitioner are aware, but what if you have a learning group at your library and then this document and this understanding of homework is what you share with adult learners, and that gives them some information to take to the school to discuss their children's homework or to offer a perspective on homework and what it looks like in their house. And so I like the idea of arming people with knowledge that's out there that they can then use, once again, outside the library walls. So we've talked quite a bit about this learning group. And now my computer is not, there we go. That it's really, it's not easy to think of learning in a way that's not, okay, I'm going to just deposit skills or bring skills and give them to learners because they don't have them and I do. But the idea of considering what, a perspective, actually, here it is, considering a perspective from outside of the dominant culture, that as literacy programs, we are that dominant culture in terms of kind of the usual set of skills that people have to be able to do things in life. But instead flipping it to saying we're affirming diverse family literacies that we know you have. We're looking at what you've got, and we're going to use that as grist for the mill in our group with the goal of transforming not only our abilities and how we can use them, but how are we going to impact and make a change in the world around us? How are we going to open up schools and other social institutions that are ours? They're all of ours. So I have some nuts and bolts here that you can take a look at on your own. You can savor every slide throughout our discussion here. But in Berkeley, when we did a group, we had adult learners meeting, and you need a group leader who is so savvy and into new ideas. And please direct them to our webinar and have them read some of this research that we've provided at the end, because it's tough to be a group leader and to really honor and respect the roles that people play in their own lives and bring it in to be shared. And then you need those crackerjack volunteer tutors, and you know who they are, the ones who can like respond to anything with great aplomb and can help children with the homework that they bring, and also steer them to the puzzle or the Lego or the cooking project, you know, those projects that Sherry mentioned about the sense of completion, that's really what homework does or aims for a lot of the time. Well, let's have some fun with them at the library and give them that same experience that's going to be helpful for them in school, even though it looks like a Lego project. So here are some possible things that you might need. And of course, I've highlighted food. I have no cupcakes here because I was like, healthy food. We'll have the carrot cupcake. But that it sitting around the table is a wonderful metaphor, and people need to feel safe and comfortable and physically taken care of. So it's not just a nice thing to offer. It allows people to participate. And I know that some programs have done a wonderful job partnering with organizations, grocery stores, Trader Joe's, to bring in that piece to partner with them. And so food is completely important. See what you can do about that. Here's some Legos. And also, you know, this wall is huge, but it folds up so nice. And it's so nice to have parents be able to focus on one side of a partition and kids be able to do their work with those snappy volunteer tutors, snazzy, I mean. And so I actually put it in here because space is such an issue, I know, for all of us. Like, split up the room, keep people in the same room, and maybe this divider's, you know, just what you've been thinking. I do not know. When? Oh boy. A lot of, you know, there are so many models out there for homework clubs that do not include adult learners. And so with a library literacy program, family literacy, you know, our focus is on adult learners, and they're the ones who are being that family leader, and they're in charge of their family. So, you know, we're very concerned with, and our expertise is with working with adults. So the time frame may be very similar to what happens with, you know, kind of run-of-the-mill homework clubs, but, you know, maybe try once a week. Maybe try a 10-week time frame or a 6-week time frame. I think that there's a balance here in that, you know, you need enough time to draw out what the issues are, what the themes are, what you're going to make inquiries about and pursue and learn about. And at the same time, realistically, what's the range of participation ability of learners in your program? And so I'd go for as long as possible that's realistic is the shortening factor. And Sherry had mentioned a little bit there, these groups, you need that comfort and that group dynamic. And it's not like people can just drop in and take off and have someone new there the next week. And so it's an issue I'm sure that all of us in our programs have wrestled with, is how to retain continuity and then also be welcoming to the person who's there ready to serve. And so I believe, and this is my perspective, and you might have a different one, which is of course fine, is that, you know, I feel like with this type of education, you need a segment of time that's uninterrupted by new forces and new personalities. And then you open it up and do another section. And so I think that might really work the best for a learning group of this flavor. Okay. All right, my friends. So we've agreed that, let's see, engagement is, what is this here?
Oh no, I was commenting to a comment.
Okay, go ahead, Sherry.
Oh, no, I just wanted, yeah. Is it out of, shall I comment on that?
Yeah, it says, yeah, what do you want to say?
Oh, okay. No, I just wanted to clarify because someone made a really good point. That the research that, when you have parents who are like sort of testing their children while they're reading and saying, "Oh, good, that was right," that was wrong. Like that's not what I meant in terms of. I think I used the word instructional, but I think engagement is the appropriate word, but it's intentional engagement, so that you're asking questions, but more as inquiry, not necessarily as testing. So that's real, and that's a really important point. So I appreciate whoever raised that in this webinar. Someone had written in a comment about that. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Sherry. And someone also asked, can you repeat the 5 characteristics of good homework design? And right now we can't because we have to go, but it is in the research at the end of the slides. And also I can take those 5 characteristics and send them out to the listserv so that you have that answer. And I'm so sorry that we're actually a little over time, I'm noticing, but you'll get that information via the listserv, okay? And check out the slides. So now what we'd love for you to do is to join us for some more, because we want to show you, we want you to experience how you can start this first group learning experience, to find out what people know about, to acknowledge their knowledge and what they bring to the table, and to share, exchange information so that you know where you're headed for the next period of meetings over the next few weeks. So if you email me at my last name, prevedel@hotmail.com. Right after we hang up today, I'm going to look at all the email addresses and invite you to a Zoom conference call, and we're going to be able to see and talk and manipulate some things, some images, not each other, and come up with some learning directions. So thank you so much. Please check out the resources, and I just appreciate your being able to join us today. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Amy and Sherry and Abigail, for a great webinar.
All right, thanks.
And for our audience, we've shared 2 links with you. One is a link to a certificate of attendance for those of you who would like one. The other is for a short survey that we would really appreciate if you just take a minute to fill that out. All the presentations in this series will be archived and available on the InfoPeople Archive webinar page. And everyone who registered and attended today's webinar will receive a follow-up email tomorrow, and you'll also have those links in your follow-up email. So thank you again, everyone, and we'll see you at our next webinar in the series, which is Family Literacy 101, From Flyers to Food, and that's Thursday, May 2nd from 10 to 11 a.m.